Welcome, everyone. Thank you again. Thank you, Ellie. My name is Amin Fazil, and I am ALP board member. And on the call, we have Ellie, Parvin, Susanna from our board team, and Jeannie Walker from our ALP team. And I wanted to welcome Ellie to our call. Thank you so much for accepting our invite and joining with us. And just a quick introduction. Ellie is a communication expert and educator. She's a university professor, speaker, coach, owner of elliepervin.com, and I'm sure you'll tell us more about it. Ellie is passionate about understanding the way people communicate and how various factors and environment can alter the perception of information delivered and communication. Her passion for communication led her to launch elliepervin.com, which helps small businesses, organizations, entrepreneurs, and individuals to learn how to practicing and cultivating communication skills, improve their lives in their bottom line and basically in their business, right? So I mean, that's what Ellie does, as well as in addition to that, she's a member of various groups. So National Financial Education Council, personal financial speaker, Forbes School of Business Women Leaders, and educator for Forbes School of Business Technology at University of Arizona Global. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining, and welcome, Ellie.
Thank you very much for having me. It's wonderful to be here and I'm excited.
We are very excited. So we'll start. Do you have any slides you want to share?
Sure. Well, first I'm happy to start with just asking everyone a question, something to think about. And what I want to ask you is, do you think you're a good listener? You can post that in the chat if you like as well, what you think if you're a good listener. If you do believe you're a good listener, do you feel you can improve your listening skills? I will tell you this right now. I feel we were born good listeners. Think about it. When you're a baby, you can't really speak. The only way to communicate is through movement and sound. What do? They're silent oftentimes, watching their parents, watching the world around them, and learning. When we're silent and we listen, that's when we learn. Of course, as we grow up, things change. We're influenced by other things around us. And if you look at it, students are some of the best learners because they're in the mode of learning. They're present with that experience and they're listening. They're listening to their professors. Sometimes in the classroom, they're they're maybe on their iPad checking the sports game. I've seen it happen, but most of them, for the most part, they are listening. And if I think back to my personal early experiences, I grew up with a mother who was a psychologist. And she tells me that she did Gestalt therapy with me growing up. She taught me to listen. She taught me to see what was beyond the words very, very early on. And I'm fortunate for this. I did not go into psychology. I went into journalism so that I could have the opportunity to continue to listen so that I could share other people's stories. But let me be honest with you, over the years, I discovered that my listening skills have dwindled a little bit in the form of many of these listening villains, interrupting, speaking too soon, not leaving enough space to let the individual talking finish their sentence because maybe at the time I think I know what's coming or saying next because I'm so wise. This is not the case. This is what brought me on this journey of looking at one of the most undervalued communication skills, but most powerful, which is listening. And I'm excited that you guys are here with me on this journey today. I'm going to pop over to my slides shortly here. Now, as you know, today that is our topic. It is the power of listening, an undervalued leadership skill that we we kind of stop learning after a while. We focus on all these different things, all the different things that allow us to be better communicators, improving our tone, improving our word choice, practicing. But when do we ever take that time to practice listening? Maybe in some professions. However, ask yourself this: have you seen a listening 101 course in any of your educational programs? Did we take listening in school when we were younger? Most likely not. But I'm hoping there will be a new trend based on some Harvard reviews I've read that they are really starting to put that emphasis on listening, especially as the world changes with technology and the devices. And perhaps some people are losing that opportunity to actually hear the words that people are saying, actually see the body language. Now, good leaders listen. If any of you are familiar with Anne McCulhay, she was the former chairperson of Xerox Corporation, and her her background, what I first have to explain is her background. What makes her a good leader is not because she planned to be CEO, she was not groomed to be CEO. In fact, when she was appointed to this position, she felt that she was failing because she didn't wasn't expecting this job role. She was in HR when she got appointed. And one of the things she talks about is that she attests the success of her turnaround of Xerox, a failing company at the time that she was appointed, to the single most important component, which was speaking. She even said, I feel like my title should be Chief Communication Officer, COO. And when she became COO or COO or CEO, she spent 90 days on planes, trains, car, traveling to various offices and listening to anyone who had that perspective on what might be wrong with the company in their department. And she said, I think if you spend as much time listening as talking, that's time well spent. And I believe it was Simon Sinek who said the role of a leader is not to come up with all the great ideas or the answers and create, and his role or her role is to create an environment in which great ideas can happen. And I wanted to share some other leaders that have fallen into this role that really value listening. These are listening leaders. And I'll mention a little bit about the definition or how we would define a listening leader, but probably after I share about these entrepreneurs, you will already know. Indra Nooyi, she is the former CEO at PepsiCo and currently board of directors at Amazon. She actually, if you go to her LinkedIn page, she has her quote on her page right up there at the top. We have two ears and one mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. And she credits the success of the culture at PepsiCo because she recognized diversity and unleashing that power of the people through actively listening to them. Again, a leader who is a listener. David Abney here. He was the former CEO at UPS and is currently the chairman of the board. He also, imagine this, started part time loading boxes when he was 17 to help pay for college. 40 years later, he became CEO. He rose up the ranks. He had experience in all the different areas of the business. And when he got to that level, he became known as a listener because he went back to the people in those departments and engaged them, made them feel a part of the company, took in their perspectives and applied them to the company. He put his money where his mouth is and he led just like a listening leader. Other great listening leaders. The last one I want to share about is Satya Nadella. He's the CEO at Microsoft. He has on his LinkedIn page, listen more, talk less. Be decisive when the time comes. And he himself has said that when he took over as CEO as Microsoft, one of the first things he did was transform the meeting culture. And in an interview with Wall Street Journal in 2015, he shared his simple three rule method for meetings. And it looked like this: listen more, talk less, be decisive when the time comes. And this is what's really interesting about this. How do you know that a listening leader is good, what his people think of him? Nadella actually has a 97% approval rating from the Microsoft employees on Glassdoor. 97% approval rating. That is a sign of a very good listening leader. I will come back into the screen and I will come back in right here. Allow me to pop back in and stop sharing. I'm back. So, one of the things that we've shared here is that leaders that listen actively, they can connect with their employees. This is why it's important to work on listening as a skill as a leader. And you do not have to be a leader running a company to be a leader. You can lead just one person in your organization. You can lead one person on your social media platform if you have an idea that you want to share. And what happens when you share ideas and you run a company? What else are you going to do? How else will you continue to grow that company or grow your concept or ideas unless there's someone listening? But once they listen, you want their feedback because that feedback is valuable. That's how we gauge what we're doing is heading in the right direction where we want it to go, or that we're coming across how we want to be heard. And so I looked everywhere for a definition of listening leader, and the closest thing I could find was from a website called Sideways Six. So I'm going to read this so I don't mess it up. A listening leader. Listening leaders are organizational leaders who, for the benefit of the company, the employees, and their own performance, choose to make active listening to the ideas, insights, and inputs of their employees a key part of a leadership strategy. And I actually want to add something to that because I think, in addition to active listening, empathetic listening is powerful. Why empathetic listening? Because think about it. If you think back to the time that you felt so connected to a boss or a leader, when was that? Was it when your ideas were heard and they allowed you to implement them? Was it also when you were able to go to that manager, supervisor, boss, leader, and share with them struggles that you're going through, whether it is in your personal life or in the office? When they listen and they sit and have that space for you to speak and share, you feel connected to that person. And that is powerful. What happens when you trust the people that listen? You want to do more, be more for them because you feel valued as a person, not just as an employee. And one of the things I'd like to actually share a story. My first job when I was 15 years old, it was summer, as is with girls and boys in high school, young men and women. It was in high school. I worked in a small office with three people, the owner and two other people that rented space. Very small office, pre computers. My job, answer the phone, take messages, greet the clients coming in. Easy enough. Well, once you sit in between the greeting and the not so many phone calls, eventually you have this idle time and you want to find something to do. And like I said, there was no computer at the time. This is pre technology, pre surfing on the webs. And I like to keep myself busy. So I ended up finding a new way to file things, color coding, using a label maker. These things are fun for me. And the the boss was so impressed and she was so wonderful. She is a small company. She would treat me to lunch and let me implement my ideas. And she validated me and even gave me a bonus for them. And to be honest with you, it wasn't until 15 years later that I found a boss that valued my opinions as much. Can anyone guess who my first boss was? My mom. It was her practice in a building that she rented. And she had two other interns that worked there that rented the space as well as she coached them in psychology. Now, the 15 years later, the boss I had was incredible. I was so used to not having my input applied or really being valued or me being valued as a person. And suffice it to say, I was fortunate enough to have people within the companies I worked in over the years that did value my ideas, who I am. And that's a good thing. You always want to look for those people in the organization to remind you of what connection should feel like. Now, the boss, as the company grew, I was one of the fourth hires. As the company grew, there became a disconnect within the organization. We quadrupled in size and moved into a larger building. No longer could we easily communicate with each other. We went from wearing several hats to wearing just a few hats. As we grew, our client base grew, we had to divvy out the hats. There's only so much one person can do. And eventually, we approached her, myself and another employee, and said, there's a big disconnect between the departments. Can we start running some meetings so everyone is on board and is in the know of what's going on in each department so that we're not having this conflict in communication and success within the organization that ultimately affects the clients, the customers, and the bottom line? And she thought that was a fantastic idea. She even got involved in it. And we had a nice little system going. Now, that worked so well. She realized that within the company, there's a lot of good ideas, a lot of smart people. And so every year, she began a contest called the Bright Idea Contest, where we would put together a PowerPoint presentation of our idea, pitch it to them in a meeting, schedule it. We'll come in with the base foundation of the idea. They'll say, okay, go with that. Or what if you tweak it like this? And this became such a success that every single person's idea began being implemented because they were the specialist in their department. They knew what other people in the company, including the bosses, didn't know in the department. And not only were their ideas implemented, they received, and myself bonuses, there were competitions for the best ideas. And what happens when not only do you get financial value and kudos and your idea implemented within the organization, your employee, like myself, feels part of the company. And what happens when you feel part of something? You're you're most likely longer to stay at a company for longer when you feel valued and not look elsewhere. You're most likely to come up with more ideas that benefit the company, the customers, the bottom line financially, and you get in the habit of being your own leader within the organization, and you can support each other. And this also improves communication within the company. It improves communication with your bosses because you feel like they trust you and thus you trust them. I cannot I cannot emphasize how powerful this contest was in developing the culture within the company. And there's many companies, new companies especially starting up, many like the one I heard here with the listening leaders that we shared in the beginning that do the same. And this is what I would love, I would dream to see as a new trend. And I really feel that you probably feel the same way too, that if we actually focused more on listening, open up to listening, then those opportunities can arise and you don't end up with this work life misbalance and stress because you're at work, you don't feel like you're part of it. When you feel like you're part of something, it helps to reduce stress because you feel like you're a part of a team. Your voice is heard, you are valued. And this has actually helped companies reduce their attrition rates because they've done the research that when you don't, when an employee does not feel valued, does not feel heard, they leave. Because what other reason is there to stay? Maybe the salary is good. But if the employee is that good, they can probably find something somewhere else where they find that feel or need. Have any of you ever gone to a job interview and even during the interview, as the interviewee, you could feel if the interviewer was listening to you? Were they distracted? Did they actually say, "Oh, this I'm just writing going to be writing notes." Really good interviewers, they will tell you, "I'm listening. I'm just going to ask you some questions. It's very comfortable. They want you to feel comfortable." And they'll mention, "I'm going to write down some notes as we conduct the interview." There are some interviewers, they don't share that. And when they don't share that they're going to write notes, what that immediately does, it triggers the interviewee to feel like they are not listening. They look at their watch, they look at their phone, they're distracted. And these are all things we want to avoid if we want to be a true leader within our organization. And again, I could digress. I say that you do not have to be the CEO to be a leader. And you don't have to be a Steve Jobs or an Elon Musk to be a leader. To be what is referred to as the transformational leadership model that some of you may have studied in your courses. They are listening leaders. Transformational leadership are those leaders that empower and inspire their employees and others. So with that, I'm going to pop on and share my screen again. Pause for delight. So I asked you in the beginning of this, do you believe or do you think that you are not a good listener? Well, guess what? I have great news. There's no such thing as a good or bad listener. There is a trained listener or an untrained listener. And if any of you have heard of Jim Quick, he has had a brain learning disorder growing up. And one of the things that I love about him is he has this fantastic podcast that's, I think, usually around 20 minutes for each one. It's all based on brain and brain training and how to improve the brain. And I actually like any area or anything I can listen to that will help me improve my brain. So, with that, I actually would love to share with you, for me, what I've found to be a tool, because like I said, I want to work on my listening skills. We can always be better. Somebody asked me the other day, what do you consider as communication mastery, since you call yourself the communication expert? And I absolutely loved this question. And to me, mastery means that we're always learning. We're always working to grow and learn and be better, because we can improve every day. It is my goal to be a lifetime learner until my last breath. And from what I have experienced here at the university, every single learner, every single colleague I've met, they feel the same way too. They love learning. And I have this really great system. It's a mnemonic system that can help you become a better listener. That is my wish. That is my hope. And and I so I ask you again, do you want to improve your listening skills? And if you're still watching, it means you do, and you're halfway there. Because wanting to learn, wanting to grow and improve areas of our life, areas of our communication, that is the initial key. So I mentioned before that I wanted everyone to grab a piece of paper. So make sure, if you don't already have a pad of paper and pen handy, please take that moment to reach for it now. I will share my screen with you. I'm really liking the sharing here. So the method is, I learn to listen. And go ahead, write this down. I learn to listen. And underline, I learn. That's a really easy way to remember and remind yourself that you want to learn to listen better. So I learn to listen. And just saying it is also really good for the brain and the neurons in the brain, to remind yourself that I learned to listen, because you do. You're taking an action and actively doing it. Now, on that piece of paper, you can write down on the far left, I learn, just like it is up here, so that it's in an acronym in a vertical mode. All right, so I'm popping back here because you don't need to look at that the whole time. I'm cuter. And we're back. Now, what you'll want to do is, down on that little vertical acronym, I learn, this is what you'll want to remember. For me personally, I feel the I is the most important. It's intention. When you're listening to someone, you want to set that intention before the conversation even happens. You're setting that intention for yourself to Be an empathetic, active listener. And remind yourself that I like to remind myself that in most scenarios, in addition to being an empathetic or active listener, depending on what the case may be, one of the positions I had at a former company was as the conflict resolution specialist. And I always went into these discussions with the idea of seeking to understand. My intention is that I want this client, this customer to be heard, and I am seeking to understand. And even if I don't understand as much about them as I could, because we don't really know everybody's experiences and history and their internal communication and experiences in life, or what they've experienced when they've had to share something difficult before. Our goal is always seek to understand. If you go in with this attention, it will allow you to have that energy, to have that mindset, to be a good listener, a successful listener, I should say. And for the L, the next one is lean in. You'll want to lean in. And this is helping to utilize your body language to show you're listening. This is actually a really good communication tip. You don't necessarily lean in when you talk because you're cutting off your abdominal airway where the air comes in that gives you the power and the energy to speak. It would cut off that strength in your vocals. But when you're listening, lean in. That signals to the other person that you're there, you're engaged, you're leaning into what they're saying. And that makes them start to feel more comfortable to share that information. The next one, A, of course, is eye contact. Eye contact. Appropriate eye contact is important. I want to emphasize, do not stare directly into their eyes the whole time. That will make them uncomfortable. But you want to make sure to give them that eye contact, glance their nose, their eyes, their nose, their eyes, maybe a little off to the side to show you're thinking and absorbing what they're saying. And another important thing you do need to do with your eyes, very important, is you want to listen to what's not being said, what's happening in their body language. What are their eyes doing? Do they look uncomfortable? Do they look uneasy? Do they look like they need additional support? Watch their body language and you'll see how they feel. When we communicate, it's not all through our voice. It's not all through our word choice and tone. It's also in that body language. And we can use our eyes to gather that information, and that becomes very powerful. And the next is A, ask and acknowledge. You want to ask engaging questions, ask questions that offer them to expand more, and acknowledge what they're saying. If you don't have any questions to ask, at least acknowledge what they're saying. I understand what you're saying. That makes so much sense. I can even imagine what you went through. I know this must have been hard for you. I'm glad you came to me. Thank you, for coming to me. And then, of course, this relays right into R, which is respond. And that is either that option to re-paraphrase or rephrase things they've said in your own words to show your understanding. And if by chance they say, no, that's not it, then ask them, then say, respond, please tell me more. Please explain to me more. This, again, you're giving them the floor, you're giving them that space to communicate and share. Remember, we're seeking to understand. And N, this is a big one. This is my communication villain when it comes to listening. Never interrupt. In fact, a really good tip I have to avoid the interruption is count the silence as a word. When the person finishes their thought, allow that silence to be a word. One of two things will happen. Either one, they'll look down and breathe, indicating they're complete, or in that silence, they'll feel comfortable. They'll feel they have the space to go deeper into what they're really wanting to share. Allow for that silence. Never interrupt. And a couple things to tag on to the nevers: never judge, never at value or evaluate what they're saying, never assume or advise. Just be there, be that person to have the space. So you can say this to yourself: I learned to listen. Remember this, review it. Every time you know you're going to have an important discussion or conversation, think about this acronym and how that might help you improve your listening skills. I'll take a moment to pop back over to my lovely little screen. So again, I have it spelled out here. I know there'll be a recording of this so that you'll be able to view it on your own as well, or you can take a screenshot. But I love that you guys took the time to write this down, because when we write, putting pen to paper reinforces that information in our brain in a way that a screenshot may not. Oh, I fast forwarded. So again, reiterating about listening, don't make being a better listener a goal. Make it a commitment. Remember, we set that intention. And now I just wanted to share this. If you want to connect to me and find me and follow me on social, I'm pretty much Ellie Parvin everywhere. And you can find me over on my Facebook page. If you have any questions, I'd love to open things up for Q&A.
Thank you, Ellie. I echo her sentiments. We'd love some Q&A. If anyone has any questions, if you want to go ahead and speak them out, you can. If you want to put them in the chat, I'll read them so that everyone can hear them and participate.
Actually, I have a question. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Hi. Hello, thank you for this. It was very informative. The question I have is, nowadays we're having a lot of Zoom meetings, like now, right? We're having right now, or Teams meetings. So all the I learned to listen. It's a very amazing thing that you share right now. But if the person on the other side is not on a video, how do you propose we understand these cues that you're saying?
I love this question, Shaw. Thank you so much for sharing it. There's several things we can do. Depending on the type of conversation you're having, you have this option. If it is a very important discussion or conversation, you can ask them, I would really love to discuss this further with you. Would you mind getting on a call or getting on a private Zoom one-on-one? Would that be okay with you?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Another thing you could do, Shaw, is to listen to the tone. Use tone as a almost mindfully visual cue. Generally, you can hear when somebody is stressed or hurried. It may or may not be because of the thing. It could be because their child keeps banging on the door or what have you. But if always come from that perspective of you don't, if it's an important discussion, is this something, Shaw, that is like such as a conflict? Is this a conflict type situation?
It may be a conflict, or it may be something that an important discussion, for example, an interview coming up, one looking for pointers, that person might have the same experience that the other person is going for. So just understanding that perspective, like, hey, if I'm not having the eye contact, I'm not getting that same engagement that I would have in person, and the other person is not comfortable being on a video, how would you recommend we deal that situation was actually the question.
And you are actually the interviewer.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things you could ask is video going to be related to their job? Oftentimes nowadays companies are starting to require this.
Mhm.
But if it's not related to their job, there is a way that you can find a way around it. You can always ask them, I really prefer for you to do video so that we can see each other like we would in a real interview. And I really want to give you that experience of as close to a real interview as we could get. Would you be opposed to this? Give them that opportunity, give them an option. If it is because of the technology that they do not have access to video, then that's okay, then you can let it slide. But one of the things is you can hear the energy in their tone, especially if it's an interview. If they don't sound as though a person has energy, then you'll feel it. For example, one of the things I've helped coach people on is when you're talking, smile, because you can actually tell if somebody is smiling on the phone, whether you can see their face or not. It's a big difference between, yes, hi, my name is Ellie, and I'm here for the interview, as opposed to, hi, I'm really excited for this interview today. And by the way, this is Ellie. You can see the difference in the tone. Does this help a little?
Yep, definitely it does.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. It's fantastic. Any other questions?
I was I was gonna say not a question but a comment. As a leader right now, one of the things I ask my team is that when we do one-on-one, I want to see them. I have set this up in a way that I have told them I'm a social person. I like to see and talk. I mean, right now everybody working from home. For me, I want to connect with people, and especially me being in a new role where I have new team, I want to build that relationship. And so my ask to them has been that I'm not going to force you to get on a video call all the time, but just when we do one-on-one, which is a short period of time, 30 minutes, I would love to see you guys. I would like to have that face-to-face conversation. And I make sure on my side that I am always on a video call. Even if they can't do it, I try to be on. And I've even given them that option. Hey, if you, I know we all work from home. If you have a small child walking around, it's okay. Just have them come by, let them sit next to you. It's fine. We can have that conversation. At least we are comfortable. And because there are times where I want to be able to listen. And if they are comfortable talking to me with their kid next to it, I'm okay with that as long as that communication is happening. And so listening part to me is just having them talk about whatever is happening in life, right? Because
Hmm.
it's really hard for people to not be in an office to talk, but virtually. So I'm like, that's one of the practice I've done is like, let's be on a video call, let's talk. And if it cannot happen, I get it. But so it definitely that's working for me.
That is fantastic, Amin. I'm so glad you do that. It's nice that you allow them to have the opportunity to do video or not and share with them why it's important to you. That's the key, is that you're sharing with them why it's important to you to do video. Because a lot of times people think, well, why do they want me to be on video? Are they trying to judge me? Everyone is afraid. They have this fear of judgment. And when you're on video, it's all there to see. Sometimes people's lives at home, they're not, this is our home space, even though we're fortunate enough to have an office. I'm so fortunate to have an office. Not everyone may have that ability and they feel embarrassed.
Yeah.
And it is, I think it's so good to share that, hey, someone might pop in here, or this might happen, or such might happen. I've had a golf ball come through the window before. It's it happens. I think this is why uh, a fantastic leadership book for a lot of people to read is Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. Dr. Brene Brown. She's also a professor. And Dare to Lead is fantastic. And there's another book that I love. It's called Gifts of Imperfection. And she really talks so much about the power and the vulnerability of imperfection. It's so much better to connect with others when we're not perfect. And if you can share that with the people that you want to do video with, this ability to not have to be perfect, and you could make a joke when, oh, I'm dressed but I have slippers on, and and which is true, by the way. You make them feel like, okay, I don't have to show up perfect. I Being present and connecting visually is going to be more powerful than any imperfection, because that's what you're valuing, is building that relationship. I love that comment. Great interjection.
And I just had a quick question. So I'm also a people leader, very used to interacting in person. And when I train, I often ask, does anyone have any questions? And some of my associates have video capability and some do not. But when I ask questions or ask for questions, I see everyone's on mute, and it's, you can hear crickets. So I wanted to know, are there any tips or phrases or specific questions that you feel like generate more feedback, or, show that you're listening or can get a deeper response? I want to show that I'm listening and ask, for follow-up or encourage someone to go deeper.
Yeah, well, if you have a group of people, you can always say things like, because everybody is on mute, right? You're doing a training, it's probably being recorded. You don't want people popping in while you're recording. People watch the playback. This is such a great question, Susanna. What you can do is, in the very beginning, address the fact that you want to make sure at the end, if they have any questions, please put it in the chat, because I want to make sure that you understand and connect with what I'm sharing. So one thing you could do is, throughout the talk, and this is obviously more helpful if you have a moderator like you're doing for this talk here, Susanna, is that you could ask throughout, what do you think about this? Does this make sense? Please type, if you could let me know either in the chat, if you're watching the recording, shoot me an email. Then this way you can kind of go back in and see if somebody had a question at that time, or you can ask them at the beginning. Write your questions down as we go along, have a separate pad of paper for questions, write them down, and I would love to address them at the end. And now here's something really important, everyone, that we want to remember, and this especially for you, Susanna, because you're training, is that when you ask a question, you will be giving that amount a little more time. One, because it takes a while for people to type things in. Two, is because there is a delay in this communication. It's not like we're sitting in a boardroom and you're training and somebody's hand goes up and you see it, or they say something and you hear it right then and there. There is still a delay because this is virtual. And it might even be when you ask, does anyone have any questions? It may be 30 seconds until they hear that. So you can just feel comfortable pausing for a moment. It's a good time to, and then you can say something to the sort of, I'll give you time to ask a question, whether you want to say it, get your notes together, or write it in the chat. And you could take that moment, grab a sip of water, anything like that, go through your notes. And if a minute goes by and you don't hear or see anything, then you can feel comfortable moving forward. The key here is, just like with listening, we want to work on, I myself as well, Susanna, we want to work on the silence, being comfortable with silence, being comfortable with that pause, and allowing that space to happen where the magic can happen.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for that great question.
Yeah. So I'll ask if anyone else has any questions. You can type them in the chat or ask them out. Otherwise, I think we are going to close for today. I don't see any questions that we haven't addressed. But I did want to thank you again so much, Ellie, for speaking. I have so many great notes that I'm super excited to take back to work and school with me. And I know that this recording will definitely be very valuable. So I can't wait to share that. I did want to give a reminder to everybody in attendance today that this is a reoccurring series. This is something that we are going to continue to do the last Thursday of every month. So the next one will be April 29th, the same time, 5:30 Pacific time. And our next speaker will be Lizzie Bronte, who actually joined us this afternoon. She did have to drop, but she will be talking about personal branding, which is going to be so amazing. I am specifically very excited about this. So we are encouraging everyone to join and to invite others so that we definitely have a good turnout. But thank you again for everyone that was able to join, to give up their time, to join our group and ask questions and participate. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.